And welcome back, and a good day to all. And we are inside the cab of our Project 2012 Red Ram today. It's been a little while since our last video, but per promises, bringing you along for the first oil change post break-in. Now, if you remember, we originally were going to go for about a 500-mile break-in. We've since lowered that to about a 300-mile break-in, mainly because with all the work that we've been doing with our tuner and all the varied driving and doing a lot of city driving, a lot of mid-throttle pulls, highway driving, and I think at this point, since we're also getting ready to come into our spring/summer, if you can't tell from all the bird chirping behind me and the fact that the vehicles are all turning yellow with pollen, we're going to go ahead and do this even a slight bit earlier than 300 miles. So we got about 270 miles on our 300-mile break-in. We're going to go ahead and do the oil change today. Now, the reason why I have you looking at a temperature chart, and if you looked at the thumbnail and the title of the video, this might spark a little bit of controversy in the comments, but a good healthy discussion is a good healthy discussion, so no problem with any of that. Is that if you remember when we assembled the engine, and what we've been using for our break-in oil is the Lucas break-in oil, rated at 5W20 with a high zinc content. So we went with what the manufacturer suggested for an oil weight that we should be using for a typical 5.7 Hemi of this vintage. What we are going to move over to, however, with this oil change is a 0w-40, in this case AMSOIL, and this is their signature series, but more about why we went with AMSOIL and signature here, I'll cover that here in a bit. But making a pretty drastic change, I don't want to say drastic change, but making a pretty good change. So we're going from a 5W20 in this application to a 0w-40. Now, I'm sure that's going to spark a lot of questions, being is it going to work okay? Is there going to be any issues with the VVT, check engine lights, things of that nature? Now, I did research this, and looking at the forum posts, it goes from one extreme to the other as to whether you can do it or you shouldn't do it, or the problems you may get or the problems you may not get. However, we're going to try it, and we'll obviously document this and bring you along if we run into any issues with this. Now, I'll also cover my reasoning for doing this and the research that at least we've done in this particular build case. But the first thing we're looking at here is a temperature chart. Now, you kind of have to take these temperature charts with a grain of salt. This is just an example of one that had both the weights I was looking for on a chart. Every manufacturer that comes up with a chart, they're slightly different. The charts will also be slightly different based on the additive package used by a particular vendor. But kind of in a nutshell, you'll see your 5W20 line here. And it's got a range, it looks to be negative 30C to 25 to a positive 25C. But if you look at our OW40, we're going to go up to, looks like it comes out to, at least on this particular chart, a negative 35C on up to a 40C. So the temperature range of an OW40 is a little bit wider. And by that, I mean, don't look at the temperature chart and think that, oh, if you exceed, a 25C in temperature, you shouldn't be using it. Obviously, the engine's going to get way hotter that in operation. In a nutshell, and I'm not an oil expert, so I'm going to way oversimplify this with this comment, and I do apologize. Now, we're getting ready to go in our spring/summer. Now, the 5W20, 5 does not mean weight, although in a lot of places, a lot of individuals will stipulate as weight. That's actually a winter rating. So it's 5 winter 20 and a 0 winter 40. So basically, what it means is that at a given temperature, at a given cold temperature, as well as a given positive temperature, that it will have a certain viscosity rating at that level before it starts to kind of peter off and level out. And the 0W40 has a greater range of basically saying that I am going to be more viscous and have a slightly better protective film at a higher temperature than a 5W20 would. Now, I realize that that is way oversimplifying the differences in oil weights. There's a lot of engineering that goes into this, but the reason why we're doing this is that we know that we're getting ready to head into spring/summer, and where I'm at, it gets hot, and trust me when I tell you, it gets hot in the summer months here. So I'm not really concerned with the increased protection in cold as we are with the increased protection in heat that we're going to get. So couple our summer temperatures with knowing that we will eventually get this to a track this summer once it's ready and start doing track times. So it's going to mean that we're going to be punishing this 5.7 a little bit more than you would if it was a typical 5.7 just doing typical truck things. Now, 5.7 normal 5.7 trucks, yeah, they're going to be occasionally hauling payloads and vehicles, and that puts strain on the engine. But again, the strain we're looking at doing is basically going from nothing to wide open throttle and trying to go as fast as extremely possible. So what we want is in this case, what I want is the 0w-40 to have that increased protection at those higher temperatures. Now, with that being said, a couple things to look into is that, remember, when we did this build, we disabled the MDS. It no longer has MDS lifters. It no longer has MDS solenoids. So we don't have to worry about those components not necessarily functioning correctly because of the thicker viscosity of the oil, because we don't have them. What is left, however, is the VVT solenoid, the oil control valve as they call it, and the cam phaser to actuate our variable valve timing. Now on this build, if you remember, we have a limiter in the cam phaser, which means we still have variable valve timing, but not as drastic as a stock 5.7 because we're also cammed. But with that being said, I'm going to show you two other Chrysler vehicles, both Hemis, both one that was supercharged and one that came supercharged from the factory. And interesting enough, the two vehicles I'm going to show you also use 0w-40 from the factory. And what you're seeing here is our 2016 2500. It's been in quite a few videos as well. If you remember, we cammed this one and we supercharged it. But from the factory with MDS, this 6.4 runs 0w-40. And it has. Even since we've modified it, we've kept it 0w-40. The vehicle you see underneath the tarp here, or underneath the car cover I should say, is a 2019 Hellcat. So 6.2 liter Hemi supercharged from the factory, also runs 0w-40 from the factory. So kind of factor that into what we've been looking at thus far. And the one component that is common between our 5.7 build, the 6.2 and the black truck, and the 6.4 in the black truck and the 6.2 liter in the Hellcat, is that the VVT solenoid and the cam phaser. Those part numbers are the same part numbers. So the phaser, the VVT phaser, and the VVT solenoid, or oil control valve as Chrysler calls it, is the same part number that crosses between, in this case, a 2016 2500, a 2019 Hellcat, and our 2012 Hemi 5.7. So from the aspect of the one component left in this engine that uses oil pressure for actuation, being the VVT system, it uses the same components as a 6.2 and a 6.4, which are also 0w-40 from the factory. Now, the one component of the internals of obviously the internals of the engine is going to be a little bit different. So the VVT solenoid and phaser, even though we know they work in an engine that would use 0w-40 from the factory, or 0w-40 from the factory, sorry. Now the oil passages leading up to that oil control valve or that VVT solenoid could very well be much smaller in a 5.7 versus a 6.2 or 6.4. So we got to keep that in mind. But again, I don't think it's going to cause too big of an issue. Other than that, remember, once again, just to reiterate that the MDS system, which is also a component that may throw a check engine light due to improper activation with the incorrect viscosity of the oil, we don't have on this 2012. Remember, we deleted it. So we don't have the solenoids anymore. We don't even have the lifters here anymore, so we don't have to worry about that piece. Because one issue you may run into running the incorrect viscosity of oil on a 5.7 is that the Hemi 5.7 will do a calculation to figure out what its engine oil weight or viscosity is, I should say. And it uses, from my understanding, a combination of temperature and pressure at a certain time to determine. And if it's out of spec, it'll throw a check engine light. Now, I don't think we're going to run that particular check here since we have the MDS system disabled. But it'll be interesting to see if it does run that check, and if it does, if there's a way that we can disable it. We'll also bring you along if we start to post any codes for the VVT system as well. Now, I did also research this online quite a bit, and there are individuals who have posted who have factory 5.7 setups that have made no modifications that run 5w30 instead of 520 and OW20, because OW20 is the same at operating temperature because the Indy number is the same. The winter rating is just a little bit different on an OW. So I've seen individuals run 5W20, 5W30, OW20, OW30, and there have been a couple individuals that posted they also run OW40. But again, you kind of have to take all this with a grain of salt. You have to do your own research for your own application and kind of know what your build is. But with that and all that talking being done, let's get to doing some actual work here. So we also have 2 oil sampling kits from Blackstone Labs that I commented on before. We're going to take a sample of the engine oil. We're also going to take a sample of the supercharger oil, get those sent off for analysis, and make sure that we don't see something in there that we're not expecting to see. For the supercharger, we're just going in with what the factory recommends on that one. We're going in with ProCharger's oil on that one. We're not making any substitutes here. We're going with what exactly the manufacturer recommends for their head unit. So with that being said, I'm going to pause you. I'm going to get you out there, and we're going to start draining some oil. So one moment. And welcome back. So I got you zoomed in to our Automotive valve here. If you remember, when we did the buildup on this engine, we added in a Automotive valve. And basically it just allows us to drop the oil out of the engine without having to get a wrench on here and constantly break loose an oil drain plug. Now, some people are uncomfortable with them, and that's fine. I've used one on the 2500, the 2016 2500 now for several years, and I had an issue. And we've got our sample bottle ready. And per Blackstone Labs instructions, they want you to kind of get a sample about midway through the pour, but they also state that it's not critical to be midway through the pour as well. They also do not want you to start the engine prior to taking the sample, but if you do, you just have to let them know when you send in the sample that you did start it prior. So we're sitting here cold. We haven't started the vehicle since yesterday. So what we're going to do is get the protective cap, and I do apologize that the sunlight coming in is kind of washed the camera out a little bit, so this may be kind of hard to see. What I'm going to do is try to get you in a little bit closer. Like I said, I do apologize. I'm just going to take the black protective cap or the black locking ring off our Automotive valve, and then all we should have to do is pull up on our valve, push it open that way, and there we go. Now I'm going to go ahead and let it run for a little bit, and then I'm going to take our sample. We'll go ahead and just take it now. It's not exactly halfway through draining our oil, but can see we got our sample. And they do have a minimum number of ounces that they want to see, and I think it's like 6 or 8, but it'll be in the instructions. So we're going to go ahead and let this go, and then once this is done, I'll bring you back. But as you can see, using those Automotive valves, it makes it really easy to get the oil drained. But I'll bring you right back. One moment. And welcome back. Well, while the oil is draining out of the engine, I figured I'd take this opportunity to go over this little Blackstone Labs kit just a little bit. Now, they got more detailed information on their website if you're looking to do something like this. But we've got a plastic baggie, which comes inside of the shipping vessel, which you can also see has some absorbent material in there in case there's a leak. You can see that in there now. There we go. So, and there's our engine sample itself. Now we've got to write per their instructions. It looks like they want the customer number, or customer name and number we'll have to write on the cap, and then put it inside this baggie, and then put the whole thing inside this container, which then that container, once it's all bundled up and ready to go, gets put back inside this shipping bag here. You can see it's no postage necessary to send it back. And inside of the baggie, as stated earlier, you get the collection, the vessel to put the collection in, what it's going to ship in, a card that needs to be, looks like, filled out and sent back. Now, you don't have to put your credit card number on this slip. They do have an option. You can go and pay the fee on the website if you want to do it that way. And of course, you get, looks to be 2 stickers along with the kit as well. And of course, the instructions on how to take the sample and how to send the sample. So when we get everything ready to go here, again, we'll just be getting all this packaged up, sent off, and I'll bring you back once the lab analysis is done on the engine oil, as well as the supercharger. And basically what we're looking for is to make sure that we don't have any excess metal particulate in there, such as something that may be indication of a bearing wear, excessive bearing wear, things of that nature. Now, the good news is I did watch the oil as it was being drained, and I don't see any glitter, anything of that nature, any large chunks of stuff coming out with that oil. So again, it's a good sign. Plus, we're not experiencing any knocking noise and things of that nature. So I'm gonna let that oil drain a little bit more, and then I'll bring you back. One moment. And welcome back. Sorry, my neighbor was getting ready to leave, so I kind of paused you there just so you wouldn't hear the excess noise. So again, we have our other vessel here that we're going to be using to take a sample of the supercharger oil. And also inside of the kit, and I just want to show you this to you, in case you haven't seen one, there is a little window sticker. Looks like they give you a little vinyl-based window oil change sticker for your vehicle, if you're inclined to use it. Now, I also commented that I would cover a little bit on why we're going with AMSOIL on this one. Now, if you're a long-time viewer of the channel, you know the oil of choice that I've used up to this point. And the reason why we're using AMSOIL is I also watch another fellow YouTuber called Rainman, and he, about a year or so ago now, or a little over a year now at this point, he opened up his own shop, and he has since become a dealer for AMSOIL. And inside of his videos, he gives you a link that you can click on, and you can go out there and buy AMSOIL at a fairly decent price. And I say that because I was able to get 8 quarts of what you can see, their signature series, which is their top series for this OW40, as I understand it. I was able to get 8 quarts of this for cheaper than 6 quarts of the oil I would normally use. And that was even with paying, to be honest with you, signed up for it and also did a 6-month PC registration. So basically have joined AMSOIL Preferred Customer Club. It was $10 for a 6-month membership. So even with the $10 for 6-month membership added to the cost of things, using Ray's link, again, I was able to get 8 quarts of the very, I should say, of the higher tiered AMSOIL, again, for cheaper than I would normally get 6 quarts of the the other manufacturer that I use, I should say. So I will also put a link up in the upper right hand corner, as well as the description of this video to Ray's latest video that I watched that has that link. And if you're inclined to get some oil, I mean, at least give it a shot. Like I said, cost wise, it's fairly, from what I can see, a fairly high quality oil at a very decent price. But anyways, with that being said, that's why we're going to AMSOIL on this one. We'll obviously bring you along and kind of show you how this works over time. And if it continues to hold out well, then I'll look at getting AMSOIL for the rest of our vehicles as well. Now, with all that being said, as the oil continues to drain here, we need to get the supercharger drained out. I'll show you that here in a second. But also to add to another reason as to why we're going with OW40 in this vehicle is that since we have two other vehicles that also run OW40 standard, being able to get this truck onto OW40 also makes things easier for us long term. So it lets us know that at least 3 of the vehicles we have all use the same way oil, and I don't have to keep, you know, a case of 5W20 laying around that only one vehicle is going to use. So that being said, I'll pause you and bring you right back. One moment. And welcome back. So this gives you a little bit better shot of that Fomoto valve, and as you can see, we're kind of just down to a very slow drip at this point. So we're just going to take our lever, go it back to close. You can hear the spring locks that lever back in the closed position. And then we can just take our little lock tab here. And you'll see that one side of this lock tab has got a slot in it, and that's where that lever or that arm is going to slide into. And there we go. And that puts our little lock tab back in place. And don't worry, it's just a plastic lock tab. Even if that plastic tab were to come off, that lever is still spring loaded inside that little groove where it sets in the closed position. So it would take quite a bit for that valve to open on its own, because you can see you can't push it forward. You actually have to take that lever because of the spring that's in it. And I just want to wake the camera up so I can see what you're seeing. You actually have to take this lever and pull it down and then push it out to get it to open up. But again, like I said, I've run that particular valve on a 2500 with the 6.4 in it you saw earlier for a fair number of years now with no issue. So I'm going to pause you. We're going to work on getting the supercharger drained of oil next, and I'll bring you right back. One moment. And welcome back. So I just want to show you the location. Remember, our supercharger has the remote oil drain line added to it as an optional part of the kit. If you remember when we did the build up, and if we just tie wrapped it to the passenger side fender liner here, makes it for nice convenient access. So again, we're just going to crack this drain bolt loose. We're going to do our collection, and then we'll kind of close that back up. So just to show you that real quick. And like I said, that supercharger doesn't hold much. It's a self-contained oiling system. And I think the bottle, yeah, it's a 6-ounce system. So that being said, let me get this one drained out. It's hard. I'm not actually have to hold the camera because there's not much clearance between the ground and the bottom of the truck. The tripod, even though it's a short tripod, is kind of in the way. So I may not be able to get you in a position to see this, but again, you're not missing anything. It's just cracking this loose. We're going to take our sample and let it drain and then put the plug back in. So one moment. And welcome back. So we're just in the process of getting our new oil filter prepped. And if you've been a fan of this channel or seen any of my previous videos, you know we like to use wicks on this channel, and I'm just using the XP, which is the extended performance version of the wicks. Just you'll see the part number there. In this case, it's a 57899. XP just again means extended performance. The standard wicks, the normal wicks filter would just be 57899 in this case. And we do date as well as put the mileage, current mileage we're installing the filter on our filters. And yes, you can see that this video is going to be hopefully shot and uploaded the same day, if not the following day. And as of this particular filter, you can see we're at 113,123 miles. We got the old filter off, and unfortunately I forgot my forma funnel, so it makes a little bit of a mess. I don't know, it's one thing about these Hemis, if you've done the oil filter before, you know right where it sits. It sits like right above the rack and pinion. See, I got some brake clean here that we'll be using a little bit later, just to kind of clean the excess oil off the boots underneath there. It just kind of tends to dribble everywhere. Unfortunately, I forgot my forma funnel, so my bad on that part. But either way, we've got our supercharger sample. We got its oil drain plug put back in. We're getting ready to put our filter back in, and then we'll start filling things back up. But I just want to show you this as well. This is what I use to get the filters off. This is put out by JM3. There'll be a link in the description below to their website. They make oil filter wrench removal tools such as this one. If they don't have a standard, if one of their standard sizes won't fit what you need, you can always email them with your requirement, and if they can quote you making a custom size one. This is the one that fits this particular wicks. Like I said, they've got several of these for various sizes of oil filters. And of course, I'll use this to remove it, but I will not use this to install it. I will install this hand tight only. And typically you saw me do this on previous videos, but normally what I like to do is take the same silver Sharpie, and the moment the gasket makes contact with the flange underneath, I'll put a mark just as a reference on the filter. And I usually like to turn these 3/4 of a turn and use that mark as a reference, and then that's it. Just again, hand tight only. No need to put any type of removal tool on there for installation. Again, this is just used for removal only, because with heat cycles and pressure and such, that will do a pretty good job of cinching itself up pretty tight. Now, as far as whether I'm going to pre-fill or not pre-fill this oil filter, I did on the initial break-in oil procedure for this one, and I may do it on this one as well. Whether you do or you do not, I'm not looking to create like a huge debate in the comment below. It's kind of your preference. If you wish to pre-fill your oil filters before you install them, more power to you. If you're not one of those individuals that don't do it, then that's fine as well. I guess one of my opinions on it is that you're never going to drain 100% of the oil out of an engine when you do an oil change. There's still going to be a film of oil on everything. That film of oil should be sufficient for a startup, because that filter is going to fill up within seconds of that engine starting up. But again, it's one of those things. If that's what you choose to do, great. If you're not an individual that pre-fills, then that's okay as well. So we're going to get things cleaned up underneath. We're going to get our oil filter installed, and I'll bring you back. One moment. And welcome back. So we got our oil filter on. We got things cleaned up back there. We've got our, remember, we've got our drain valve closed for oil, and we're just in the process of filling the supercharger up here first. Supercharger is no different than it is on an engine. It comes with its own dipstick that we'll check our fluid level with after we get it filled up, and it just gets filled through the same dipstick port in this case. So again, it's you'll see it's kind of got a green tint to it. Again, it's their own proprietary blend of oil. Not exactly sure what it is, but again, as you can see, it's a self-contained oiling system. Again, it holds about 6 ounces, at least in this particular head unit's case. It holds about 6 ounces, and once again, that's the D1SC. We did upgrade this kit. Normally a Ram 1500 kit would come with a P1SC. We upgraded to a D1SC. So it's actually the same supercharger head unit that we put into our big 2500 over there as well. So we're gonna get this filled, and I'll bring you back. One moment. Oh, I'm sorry. And I've mentioned this before, but when you get replacement oil from ProCharger, you can get them in this box that comes with 3 of these bottles, and I'll normally change this oil at the same time as the engine so they stay on the same interval. As well as you only get 1 of these little dispensing cones that fit into this port over here, so make sure you hold on to this upper piece here so you could use it for your other 2 bottles. But I'll let you go and I'll bring you back. One moment. And welcome back. So we got our oil into our supercharger head unit. We got our dipstick put back in. Per their instructions, we've used the 6-ounce bottle of oil to refill it. We did check it on the little dipstick that's on that little stainless steel wire, and it does check. Now, I've showed this before in the previous video when we did the install. The end of that dipstick it's dark in color, and with their kind of oil blend being a greenish in color, it kind of makes it hard to see on their dipstick. But as long as you're in a well-lit area, like if you're out here in the sunlight, you can see it fairly easy, the minimum and max marks that's on that again, that little dipstick that comes out of there. It's also kind of hard to catch it on the camera because it's fairly small print. But either way, we've got that filled, we've got it checked, we're good to go there. Again, I just commented that we do have our filter installed, and yes, I did pre-lube the sealing surface O-ring on that, even though I didn't show it previously. I do apologize. So we're in the process of just getting your engine oil in. Now, on this particular vintage 5.7 Hemi, when you're doing a filter, it is a 7-quart oil change. Why 7 quarts? Well, you know, Hemi, what can I say? What I usually like to do is put about 6 3/4 of a quart in, so not quite the full 7. Start it up, wait till I see some oil pressure, give it a couple of seconds, make sure that it has plenty of time to fill the oil filter. If you did not pre-fill your oil filter earlier, again, that's your choice if you choose to do so. And then let things settle and then check it. And then obviously if it needs it, go ahead and add in the other remaining 1/4 of a quart. Again, just want to make sure, especially on this engine, since we've done all this buildup work on it, that we don't overfill it. But generally, it will take all 7 quarts to get it up into the middle area or slightly above middle area of the hash mark. But I'll show you that when we get to it, in case you're curious. But I'm sure you've probably have seen these before. But you can kind of see your hash marks start there. That's generally your add mark. That generally means you're about a quart low. And by the time we're done, we should be about somewhere within the middle of this hashed area. So again, I'm going to put about 6 3/4 quarts in here, or about 6 1/2, maybe 6 3/4. And I'll bring you back. We'll do a quick startup on it, take a look at our oil pressure, and go from there. Now, we are using a little bit thicker of an oil here, obviously. Now, with that being said, we should see a little bit higher oil pressure than what we would with the 5W20, both cold and hot. With that being said, remember that we have the milling high volume oil pump on this motor, and we know what the numbers look like cold, and we know what the numbers settled into with during a hot idle. And by settle into, I mean, since this engine was new, the oil pressure, both cold and hot idle, on those first couple of starts were a little bit higher than normal, because as those new bearings in the crank and the piston rods and pretty much everything starts to wear together, those tolerances open up a little bit as part of the break-in process. So it's naturally to see the oil PSI kind of dip a little bit as far as what's normal for cold and what becomes normal for hot idle. So we know what those two numbers are as of yesterday, and it'll be interesting to see how it compares now with a little bit thicker of an oil. So with that being said, also again with the milling high volume pump, you may be asking yourself the question, is there going to be an issue with that? And I say no to that, because oil pump is an oil pump. It's going to pump the oil. And again, this is milling high volume oil pump that we're using is meant for 4th gen Hemi. So it would fit this 5.7. It would fit the 6.4 you saw earlier, as well as the 6.2 liter that you saw earlier in the Hellcat. So with that being said, it's since those from the factory again run 0w-40, there should be no issue with that pump pumping that weight of oil as well. So let's get some oil in here and I'll bring you back for the startup. So one moment. And welcome back. So we got about 6.5 quarts filled, and it's kind of hard to see, but the full mark is there. That's top full. We're right about here. So since we're about I don't know, maybe 1/8 of an inch or so away from full, right at the edge of the word safe there, I'm going to go ahead and dump in the remaining of the 7th quart. Because again, we're about 6.5 quarts in, knowing that that filter is empty, and that filter is going to suck down probably about 1/2 to 3/4 of a quart, and then so it'll obviously, you know, be a little bit over full, but it's only going to be over full for a few seconds until it primes that filter. So let me get that other 1/2 quart in. I'll bring you back. One moment. And welcome back. So we got you in the cab here. So we got our oil in, we got our 7 quarts in. Remember, our filter is not primed at this point, so it may take a few seconds longer than normal to prime oil pressure. And running the 5W20 break-in oil, after a period of time, a cold start like this, we would see probably about 80 to 81 psi oil pressure. And then obviously as the oil heated up and thinned out a little bit, then we would see the pressure drop a little bit. So it'll be interesting to see what we end up with 0w-40 cold. I can tell you that on the 2500 you see there, which is a 6.4, that when we did the buildup on it and we added the cam and removed the MDS system, we went with a Hellcat oil pump. So on this 2500, it gets about 74 psi on a cold start for oil pressure. And then hot idle settles in about 40 to 44 psi. And the Hellcat starting cold, which also again uses 0w-40, is about 70 to 72 psi cold. So let's see here. Now it'll take a couple seconds, like I said, probably longer than normal. Let's turn that off so we don't get a copyright strike. So we're looking at our oil pressure here, and let's see what we get. Here we go, about 79 psi. So we're getting 79 psi, and under 5W20 we got 81 psi. So a few psi less, but that could also be that, remember, our ambient temperature right now is 64 degrees, and earlier when we were running the 520, it was like 50s and 40s. So again, we're getting into our spring/summer. So we're gonna let this run for a few more seconds, then we'll shut it down and we'll do a final check on our oil level. But 79 psi at 64 degrees Fahrenheit pressures. Then we're dropping to 78, so you see we're starting to warm up a little bit. The engine sounds good, sounds nice and smooth. So I'm going to let that settle, and I'll bring you back and we'll do a check on our oil level. One moment. And welcome back. So I just wanted to show you this again real quick. If you saw when we first started it, the few seconds there before it registered oil pressure, because it was in the process of getting the filter primed. So now that we've kind of let it settle a little bit and it's got the filter primed, let's see how much faster it potentially is. Yeah, you can see right there. Probably about, what, about 3 or 4 seconds faster on the oil pressure reading, now that it's got everything primed and up to snuff. Okay, once again, we'll let it settle and I'll bring you back. One moment. And welcome back. So we checked our oil. We needed about another 1/2 quart, so we're running about 7.5 quarts on this particular setup, which is not abnormal for our setup. I know I said it was a Hemi 5.7 is typically a 7-quart oil change with a filter. We're running a 7.5, and we actually ran into that issue when we first built the motor and filled it for the first time, even allowing the filter to fill, which was what we did on this as well. And I think it's because it's an aftermarket oil pan, and I think the aftermarket oil pan is just a bit deeper than the factory one was. But again, no harm, no foul. That's why we have measurements on our dipsticks and make sure that we check them that we're within tolerance or within range. We also took it for a little bit of a drive, just once we get everything checked out and done, just so it could recycle its own old oil. And so far, everything's running fine. There's no complaints, no dash lights, no dings, no check engines, no warnings, nothing running inappropriately. Everything's running as we would expect it to do, and it's actually running, dare I say, a bit smoother than what it was when it was running the 5W20. We are seeing a slightly increased oil pressure at hot idle, which we would expect since this is a 40 versus a 20. Now, with that being said, am I suggesting that you do this same modification? Absolutely not. Again, we were doing that modification here because, once again, we were running a highly modified setup. Obviously, we are supercharged if you've watched the previous video series, and we are also running a 2.5 stage high left cam, as well as we did MDS systems. So we're running non-MDS lifters, remove the MDS solenoids, and the only piece that is remaining that once again requires oil to actuate it is the VVT solenoid and phaser. And remember, we're also running a limiter in that phaser as well, so it doesn't have as big a sweep as it normally would when it comes to adjusting that variable timing. Now, just to reiterate, we did look up the parts. The VVT solenoid, or the oil valve as Chrysler calls it, as well as the phaser, are the same parts used on a 6.4 stock and a Hellcat stock, which again, both of these vehicles from the factory run 0w-40. So again, so far, no harm, no foul. Everything's working fine with it. We're getting the expected results out of it. And once again, we're mainly made the switch because we're coming into our spring/summer, and we wanted the additional protection, heat protection that the 40 will give to us, especially when we get to the track and really kind of start hammering things. With that said, just as a reminder that we used the link from Rainman Ray to get the AMSOIL. We're trying that out here on this channel. It was not a paid by any chance. We didn't receive any free product for it. We are trying it out as part of this build series here, and I will put a link on the right hand side of the screen, as well as it's also below to Ray's channel. So if you choose to try out his AMSOIL link as well and save yourself a little bit of money. And once again, we were able to get 80 quarts of their signature series 0w-40 for as much as it would cost us to get 6 quarts of 5w-20 and standard in my normal brand. So not only were we able to get what is being called a higher quality oil, but we were able to get more of it for a cheaper price than we would normally pay. So all good all around, but we will definitely keep you addressed and informed of how this goes long term. And obviously, if any issues arises, such as check engine lights, anything of that nature that relates back to switching this over to, again, 0w-40. Now, one thing we do have to address, which I'm looking for a replacement on, I will get this oil cap replaced, or at least at a minimum, just remove the 5w-20 from this existing cap, just so it doesn't throw people off. But once again, nobody else should be doing the oil change on this particular vehicle other than us, and obviously we're well aware of the change. So with that being said, I will let you go. I've rambled on long enough. So far so good. We are completed with our break-in at this point, and we will continue forward. We still have to get the wideband O2 attached to be able to do some additional logging for the tuner. We still have the rear end work to do. On the channel, we've got some upgrades planned for our 2500, just awaiting parts to come in. So we have more items on the way. We're going to start doing a little bit of upgrades to our 2500, which has kind of been sitting here on the wayside waiting for its turn, so to speak. So with that being said, if you have subscribed, I do thank you. If you have not, please consider doing so. And once again, the links for everything will be in the description below. And I do thank you. And with that being said, I'll let you go. Bring you back for the next one. Thank you much. Bye.